Hello friends, this is April with Health for Life Cooking. Did you know that when you sprout a grain, you explode the nutritional value of it and you make it more digestible? I don't do a whole lot of sprouting, but I recently discovered a little grain called sorghum. And for some reason that little grain was just screaming sprout me, and so I did. And it's super delicious, I really love it. And I did a video a while back demonstrating my pseudo grain salad, and this salad I have for my lunch every day. And I mentioned that I used this sprouted grain, and a friend of mine reached out and says, hey, why don't you do a video about how to sprout the grains? So I decided today that that's what I'm going to do. And you can use this sprouting method for most types of grains, seeds, and nuts as well. So this will be just a general sprouting demonstration. All right, so let's get going. So for best results with your sprouting process, you're going to want to have a quart jar, canning jar. And also, and I use the wide mouth. You can use the narrow mouth, but I like the wide mouth. A little bit easier to work with. And you're going to want to have a sprouting lid. And there's these plastic ones. You can also get a stainless steel one. And I just got these online, but you can find them at most kitchen stores. And here's your sorghum grain. And it's pretty small. It's about 4 times the size of millet, kind of round. And all we're gonna do is, I do this about 3/4 of a cup at a time. So I'm gonna measure out a half a cup, put it in my jar, and then another about a 1/4 cup. And then I'm just gonna add some water, kind of slish it around right there so they're all submerged. And I'm just gonna set this up on my windowsill, and you don't need to put it in your windowsill, but that's just handy for me. And we're gonna let that soak for 8 hours. All right, so it's about 10 hours later, and I've had my sorghum soaking. And I forgot to mention that when you add the water to your dry sorghum, you wanna add about 3 times more water to sorghum, because that is the grain is going to expand. So anyway, we're gonna go ahead and drain this. I let it go about 10 hours just because I didn't have the time, but I want to let it go at least 8 hours, and you can go up to 10 or even maybe 12 hours, but you don't want to let it go too long because it'll start to smell funny. All right, and then I'm gonna add some water, some fresh water. Give that a good rinse. Drain it again. And I just kind of disperse them around the edge of the jar. I don't want them a clump in the bottom of the jar. And then I'm going to let them drain. And you can get racks to let them drain on, but I just usually do. I've only usually got one going at a time. And having a rack is just one more thing to have in my kitchen. So I just use my sink. And I'm going to just put it at the edge of my sink like so. And then I'm going to let that drain for a few hours. And after I get done, I'm going to put, and I could just let that sit there all night, but I usually put this up in my windowsill, and there's really no reason to put it up in the windowsill other than it's a convenient place for me to put them. It doesn't necessarily need the sun, but I am going to just let that drain for a few hours before I do that. So we'll come back in about 24 hours and see how it's doing. So it's the next morning and I need to rinse them. So I'm going to go ahead and add some water to my jar. And make sure they all get wet. And then I'm going to go ahead and drain. All right, and then I'm just going to set them in the corner of my sink like I did previously. Like so, to let them drain. And after an hour or two, I'll put them up in my windowsill like I did before. And I'll check them tonight and see how they're doing. All right, guys, it's about 10 hours since my last rinsing, and I needed to let you know that I rinse these every 10 to 12 hours. So what I usually do is I rinse them in the morning when I get up, and then I rinse them again when I get home from work. So they just need to be rinsed at least twice a day. So we'll go ahead and do that. Rinse them really good, and then drain. And then I'll be back with you in probably another 24 hours, and we should have some pretty good sprouts going, and then we can cook them. All right, guys, there we've got some sprouts going on. Hope you can see those. Maybe I'll take some out of my hand and where you can see them a little bit better. So there we are. There we go. There you can see them. Cute little sprouts, aren't they? All right, I'm just gonna put these in my pan because I am gonna cook them. And I don't know if I mentioned this, but I just don't like raw grain, even when it's sprouted. So that's why I cook it. And you could let it go 2 or 3 more days and it might be a little bit more enjoyable to eat, but I personally prefer to just cook it. And you still get the extra nutrients that is in them. Just because you're cooking them doesn't mean you're killing them. I'm just gonna rinse my jar out. And I'm not measuring water, I'm just making sure that they can swim really well. About like that. And then I'm gonna put the lid on and bring that to a boil, turn it down to simmer. And I've got some other things cooking on the stove, that's why you can hear the clicking. I'm gonna go ahead and turn that up to high, bring it to a boil, and then turn it down and let that simmer for about 20 or 30 minutes. It takes a little bit longer to cook. All right guys, here is my cooked sorghum grain. It's nutty and chewy and I love it on my green salad, which I have already mixed it into. I hope you're inspired to give sorghum a try and even give it a sprout or try sprouting with